Are you guys so excited? So excited.
Depends what we're doing.
To learn about main motions?
So what?
Parley Pro.
Main motions. I second that. I second my.
I seconded one at the meeting, and I feel so proud of myself.
So proud. Okay. On page 123 in your books, there's a place where you can write down all sorts of stuff about Parley Pro, and we're gonna train you so good so that you get so good at Parley Pro.
You're like, why don't you guys have your stuff?
What page? 131.
Because I let Mason put my stuff on the one. And now it's gone.
And Mason and Kyra.
Wait, what page? 132.
123.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, is that what you said or is it not?
So we are going to be talking about Parley Pro today. We're going to be talking about main motions and abilities and all the stuff that you can do to an idea in Parley Pro for the next long time. But no, you can. You want to wave?
Hey guys.
So yesterday we I'm recording it.
Yeah,
I can
Alexa, she's trying to teach.
So then I upload it to YouTube and then they can watch it.
YouTube. How many subscribers?
I have 2 different channels. One has like 20 and one has like 100.
No. What if we got a bunch of thousands and we can start making money?
Yeah. So yesterday we've had kind of like a little group discussion. You guys decided to take a Disney cruise ship with a plane and an extra boat to Hawaii.
A yacht, to be exact.
And a yacht. I'm so sorry.
We got the green. I call them
So we talked about kind of what happened when you guys had the discussion yesterday, right? So at one point, we came up with the idea, right? At one point, AJ said, hold on, guys, let's take a break. I need to call Mark Cuban and see if he'll sponsor us. And then called some poor lady sitting on her couch. But for that, that's an ability that we would call a recess, right? We want to take a recess. We want to take a break. That's something that we can do. At one point, Ryan said, why don't we have a small group of us that's going to research this topic and they can tell us all like what they find out later. That's what we call referring to a committee. At one point, Alexis said, hey, maybe this idea is too expensive. What if we change it and we just decide to, what'd you say, go to the Historical Society?
Yeah, but I was 100%
You know what? It's all a whole issue.
So that is what we call an amend, right? An amendment to the motion. No, you dare. Mason, what are you doing with that?
What?
Do you have gum in your hands?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. I saw it and I got scared. I thought you were sticking it under your chair.
No, I think my foot.
And I about had a heart attack.
That's funny.
She goes, don't you dare.
Don't you dare. That's the gross
What?
It really grosses me out. It really does. Like chewing gum in my zone makes me vomit. Like legitimately gag. One time in a table in the ag room, we found a big old wad of it, and I had to leave the room. And I told whatever kids were in here after school, I was like, "Y'all need to take care of that, and then let me know when it's done." Like, I can't use it.
Like, she's not even mad that it happened. She just clean it up and get out.
Like, I need it taken care of. So yesterday, when we were talking about that whole idea of Parley Pro, right? You guys naturally had these things that you were doing. We just need to learn how to plug them into the right format so that it's legal when you do it, and then you guys are lethal in the boardroom.
So it's illegal?
It's legal and lethal.
Why would we're breaking the law? What would do would be illegal?
Well, no, here's a great question to ask is when we're talking about something being legal, when a group decides to do something, they have to follow that legal Parley Pro protocol for it to be an official decision of that governing body. Like our FFA chapter has a constitution. Okay, and we have bylaws, and a lot of boards and organizations have constitutions and they have bylaws. And so in order for anything to happen in those organizations, they have to pass it with proper Parley Pro. Yeah. So what we're going to talk about today is what's called a main motion. And this is the ground floor, this is the base for anything that you're going to do with Parley Pro. So a main motion is really just the way to come up with an idea and present it to a group. Okay. After that, everything that we do stems off of a main motion. Okay. So if you guys want to jot this in your book, a main motion is a member's formal proposal.
Miss Wall, I have a question.
Yeah.
When's her birthday?
January 19th.
Mine's January 7th.
You want to have a party?
Yeah.
Mine's
Okay.
September 9th.
I had a
January
sophomore one year that asked me, they said, hey, if we bring in cake for your birthday, can we cut it up and eat it in class? And I said, I mean, yeah, but also like any day, if you want to bring in cake, we'll cut it up and eat it in class.
Wait, really?
I mean, we'll still learn while we eat it, but like,
We should tell
yeah,
them.
you want to bring in, actually, I don't know with COVID if we can do that anymore,
Why not?
but
They
Screw it.
we don't have to tell anybody.
we're recording.
Oh.
No. Put that part out.
But a main motion is a member's formal proposal to a group or chapter that takes some sort of action, right? So it's literally your formal way of saying, I have this idea. An example, I move that we order an entire semi-shipment load of flaming hot Cheetos.
No. No.
Anyone second that?
Nobody.
Motion dies.
Awful idea. But that's the idea of a main motion. I move that we adopt a pet baby elephant so that we
I second that.
so that we can raise it up and ride it through the parades in town with FFA banners on it as a representation of our chapter.
Why have we not done that? None of
Right?
it.
I don't know.
What's his name?
So it's a formal proposal, whatever you want to do, that then we go about properly. Okay? When this proposal is put before the group to consider, are you guys cool with me just writing it on the
Wait,
board
what
like
are
this?
we writing?
Yeah.
Where's
Like
consider
the
go?
elephant
Anything
one?
like that, yeah.
Where's consider go example?
No, like after that. You guys can write down whatever you want as the example. Are you guys cool with me just writing these on the board like that? Okay. Usually I like project the notes and fill them in, but if you're
Can
cool
I
with it,
just put example buying an elephant?
yeah.
Buy elephant.
So it's a formal proposal. So it's the formal proposal. It's put before the group to consider. It must be supported by at least one other member before it can be discussed. So you can't just stand up when somebody makes a motion and say, that's an awful idea, sit down, okay? We have to go through the motions before you can stand up and formally say, Madam President, and then they call on you.
That is an
And then
awful
Camry
idea.
says, that is an awful idea. Please never bring that up again.
I love
And then you
how
sit
people.
down.
I love how people don't even like listen to what they're saying. They just be like, I second that.
Yeah.
You know, they don't even know what they just said.
Most of the time our agendas are pretty well preset, so it's nothing usually dangerous, but so before it can be discussed, this can be done with the use of a second.
Can you be like, I rescind my seconding?
We'll talk about rescind later.
What if you can third it?
As you just vote on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
If the motion is not supported by another, the motion dies for lack of support.
I second that.
Okay. It can now be approved, disapproved. So vote up or vote down. Or modified through what we call an ability. And we're going to learn about abilities for a long time, but that could be maybe we're going to amend the motion, maybe we're going to postpone it, maybe we're going to change the date, maybe we're going to do all sorts of stuff. So it can be approved or disapproved as written, or it can be modified. It can be withdrawn.
It cannot be.
It cannot be withdrawn without permission from the group. So once somebody stands up and says, I second that, that motion now belongs as property to the group, okay? So you can't stand up and be like, hold up, I changed my mind, I withdraw my motion, I don't want to do it anymore. We've already got support, you have now given ownership of that motion to the group, okay? Or you can try to withdraw it, but then the group would have to give you permission to do that. If you withdraw it, basically just nobody votes and we just make sure it goes away. Discussion of the motion. And we'll get this all down and then we'll talk about it. Discussion of the motion gives members the ability to express their opinion in support or opposition of the question. Question is another word for motion. Okay, they're interchangeable. A main motion is amendable, so you can change it even after it's on the board. So if somebody stands up and says the whole motion about buying a pet elephant and you're sitting here thinking, you know, I really love the idea of having a pet that we can ride through festivals, but I feel like a camel would really suit our chapter better. We're going to be able to store it better. It's going to be able to live in the shop. The feed is not as expensive. Maybe that's a more feasible option. Okay. And when we're sitting here, we're like, okay, like elephant, I love this idea, but like,
Where do you even get an elephant?
Africa.
yeah.
You steal it.
Let me
A
go
zoo?
take my van
Yeah,
up
we
there
can
and get
steal
one.
one at the zoo.
But maybe later we can stand up and be like, hey, instead of an elephant, let's get a camel. Okay. And you can make those amendments later when we
Maybe
go throughout
just
the
a horse.
motion.
No.
Amendments are used to adopt. Provisions to the main motion. So an amendment basically is a proper way of saying, okay, yes, we all agreed to changing it to camel instead of elephant. The result of discussion during the meeting to make it more acceptable. So especially if we're debating it, and a lot of the debate that we're hearing on the motion is saying like, you know, we don't have a place to keep it, we don't have the feed for it, we don't have a saddle that'll fit it, we don't have this is not an option that we could have. A lot of our members are allergic to elephants. So maybe throughout this discussion, we're hearing all this negative stuff. And so we stand up and say, hey, I amend this, what about a camel? Okay. To make it more acceptable. And people are like, oh yeah, nobody's allergic to camels, this works. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
When a proposal is ready to be decided upon, it shall come to a majority vote. What does majority mean?
Like most of them.
Yeah. So half plus one. Right? Vote by the assembly. The principle of majority vote must guide the action of all democratic organizations.
You saying this now makes me really easily put together the video that we watched.
Yeah.
And what they did.
Well, and that's what yesterday that video was probably you kind of zoned out of it at probably at some point because you're like, I don't have any idea of what they're doing.
Yeah.
But hopefully now, like, my goal of
like
that.
the majority vote when they were like, it's a 2 to 3 vote, everyone sit down and like.
Yeah. And so the goal of that was that you guys would kind of be confused, but as I'm saying some of this stuff, it starts to click as to what it's supposed to look like, right?
Like, how do you determine if the vote is majority or 2/3?
The different amendments require different types of votes. So some things that like take away a right of a member, like if we're saying like, this isn't a thing, but if we were to say like, nobody can use the restroom the rest of the meeting, that would be taking away a right of yours. So that would require a 2/3 vote where you would need 66% of the people instead of 50% of the
Like
people.
she said this will require a 2/3 vote.
Mhm. Yeah. So some things you need more people to vote positively for.
So if I need to go to the bathroom during a meeting, I have to be like, Madam President, and be like, can I go to
I
the
would
bathroom?
shut everybody
And
down.
that is what is called
Okay,
a question of privilege, and we'll talk about that. And then the whole time that we do Parlay Pro, you have to raise question of privilege if you have to pee during ag class.
No.
Promise. It's super
See,
easy.
this is where I don't speak.
So
So it's I have to be like,
Madam
Miss
President.
Wallet,
Madam
may
Chair.
I use the restroom?
I don't know what.
Chair.
Madam Chair.
The chair is an interchangeable word for president if the chair is actually not the president of the organization. Because sometimes, like, if we have a committee meeting, the chair of that committee, they're in charge of it. But, like, the last committee meeting we had, Joe was the chair, right? Joe's the sentinel. So you wouldn't stand up if you were going to have proper discussion during that. We wouldn't stand up and say, like, Mr. President.
You wouldn't
Because
say
he's,
madam either.
right. So, and we wouldn't stand up and say Mr. Sentinel, right? We'd just stand up and say, hey, Mr. Chair. Because he's in charge of that meeting.
I don't like Mr. Chair. That's not right. It needs to be madam.
Sorry, all of the presidents have to be girls, is what she's saying.
That's racist.
Does this make sense though?
That's not
Formal
racist.
idea saying this is the idea that I have. It has to be supported by at least one person in order for anything to happen. Then we discuss on it really formally, meaning basically that we're not just talking over each other the whole time. You have to have what's called the floor. in order to be able to talk, so you have to have gotten recognition from the chair. So that's why when some people stand up, they'll say Madam President, and then she'll say Alexis, and then you have the permission to speak at that point.
What if she's like, don't talk?
Then you don't get to talk.
That's so weird. Enjoy home. Don't speak.
This cool?
Myself.
Cool. Okay, I want to walk you through kind of like the steps of it really quick, and then we're gonna practice making a main motion.
We only have like
Yeah, we only have like 5 minutes.
Only have what?
like 5 minutes.
We can do it.
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
so step one, if we're gonna make a main motion, is introducing the main motion. We have to bring it up.
Flying an elephant.
Yes,
Introduce.
a main motion.
We should buy a Gucci jeans.
Okay. So in order to introduce the main motion, you rise and get recognition from the chair. So you stand up and say, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair. They say, yes, Chloe. Okay. Recognition from the chair. By stating the words, Mr. or Madam Chair. So literally stand up, Madam Chair, Kayla, and then you can start speaking.
Oh, my neck. Wow, I need to.
The chair will call on you, hence allowing you to make your motion. Or speak.
I have a question.
What's your question?
So, how did you pick the people that like brought up about each committee, like Marcy and Sam and?
Yeah, we have committee reports that are given out at the beginning. So usually we try to pick people who are on those committees. And so the assistant secretary keeps track of those committee reports, what needs to be given. So that's Megan Greenwell's job. And so basically, usually at the beginning of the meetings, she hands those out to people. So if you want to start doing those, you can just say like, hey, I'd like to give old business or committee reports at the meeting. The first 2 meetings, she was given distinct instructions not to give them to freshmen because you guys really have no idea what's going on, right?
Yeah, someone tried to hand one to me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Colin tried to
Gabe-
hand it to me, and then he was like,
Gabe
"Wait,
tried to
I'm
give
on."
this to me.
Yeah. So
They didn't
now
touch
that
it
you guys
yet.
have done 2 meetings, if you guys want to do that, you can start saying like, hey, can I have one of those? Like, I'd like to give one of those reports.
Do you have to like follow the order of the committee reports on the agenda?
No, you just have to give them during the time that we're doing committee reports. Yeah, during that set aside time.
I thought we went in order.
Sometimes we do. Sometimes people like to go out of order. Every motion that you say has to start with the words, I move that. Okay? You can't say I motion that. You can't say we should get a tiger, right? For it to be legal, it has to start with I move that we buy a tiger.
I hit the bottom.
Step 2 is what? What has to happen? Ironically, it's step 2.
Second.
Yeah, it has to be seconded. So once the motion has been presented, in order for the assembly to consider it, it must be seconded by another member. This can be done without recognition from the chair by saying, I second that. And again, that is just saying whether you agree with it or not. So you don't even have to be in favor of it to second it. Like, you can vote against it, you can talk negatively about it, but if you think that it's still something the group should talk about, it needs a second. That cool? We got on main motion. We'll finish that tomorrow and then we'll practice some main motions, okay?
Okay.